Okay, good morning, everyone. So we start the first public session today. What we're going to do is, before we move into the item on sustainability, we're actually going to have a look at the revised draft of the exposure draft 93 on materiality. And thank you very much to staff, Agostina in particular, but also to the members and TAs that I think have really done some excellent work over the last couple of days on our behalf. So thank you very much for that. I think what I will do is, I think I'm handing over to you, Dave.
I was going to repeat what you said, Ian. Just thank you to members who spent their time last night. Thank you to the 2 members and 2 technical advisors who helped Augustina draft the work. And thank you to Augustina for turning this around so quickly. I don't think we'll necessarily go through a lot of detail. I'll give a quick overview of the changes. And then there's one change Augustina wanted to highlight coming out of members' comments from last night. And then we'll go into a page flip to see if there's anything else that needs to be amended. So very broadly, the changes came, I'd say, from comments related to adding a better narrative around the phases of the project, why we're doing this project, and really highlighting this is phase 1 of a potential 3-phase project, and then adding some clarifications through footnotes and more basis for conclusions throughout the document. Augustina, before I start the page flip, can you highlight the one change that came from one of the members?
Yes, thank you, Dave. Hope you can hear me properly in Washington. So one of the changes that came through was a member that said that, similar to what it was done on the conceptual framework, to add a footnote to clarify that the terms primary users and users were seen to represent that same group of users interchangeably in the conceptual framework, whether the same footnote should be added on IPSAS 1. What staff recommended and the member was content with was a similar approach taken by the ISB when they did the same amendment in their literature, was to add a BC to IPSAS, in their case IS1, in our case IPSAS 1, highlighting that point that the terms primary users and users across IPSAS are used interchangeably. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Augustina. That was clear to me. We'll go through the document, and when that pops up in IPSAS 1, happy to highlight that again.
Okay.
So I'll start on page 1 of the document that was circulated yesterday night. That's the title page. Page 2 is legal. Page 3 is the request for comment. I think this is where the first substantive change is. It's the objective section where we added the phase 1, 2, and 3 right in the middle of the page. Page 4. Page 5, we updated the table of contents to be a little more relevant. I'm seeing heads nodding from some members. Page 6 is Amendment 1. Page 7 is the basis for conclusions.
Sorry, Angela, I didn't notice. Yeah.
Thank you, Augustina, and thank you for turning this around so quickly, and thank you to everyone contributing, because I think this is a great piece of work in terms of communication with our constituents and clarity of our own strategy. So thank you so much. I just wanted to ask a question on paragraph BC 3.32K. And I note that, and it's to do with the connection with the footnote, which I support, adding the footnote. But in 3.32K, it says this term, beg your pardon, the second sentence, for consistency purposes, the IPSASB decided to clarify that users refer to the description of materiality are primary users for GPFRs. And I think there's two consistencies that I have in my mind. One, a consistency internally within the conceptual framework. And I note that the footnote in some ways addresses that by saying in the conceptual framework internally, primary users should be read interchangeably with users. And that's fine. And it saves all that amendment. So that's perfect. No problem with that. But I just wondered if we could get in the idea that we're also put primary in front in the materiality description in chapter 3 in preparation for consistency in our standards. So I think there's in preparation for, I'm not drafting, but I think it's just for consistency purposes. What does that mean? Reading this in this particular area, you think it's consistency within the conceptual framework. Can we just add something to say for consistency within the framework and, I don't know, and for applying to standards or our pronouncement? It's just that idea, because I think constituents might go, why do you need to do that for consistency within the framework? Because you've got the footnote that tells me they're all interchangeable terms. That was just a small point, really, but I didn't really want to add much to it. I just wondered if people would then say, why have we got the footnote?
So Angela, I see Augustina's head nodding, so I think leave that with staff. I think we'll have to balance the line between referencing to the standards, but I take your point and we'll work with you on that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think the point is that the conceptual framework applies to GPFRs. So anyway, I think we'll have to take that one offline, but I don't want that to hold up approval. Okay.
So next, that takes us to page 8, the amendments to IPSAS 1. Page 9 is the continued amendments to IPSAS 1 and the basis for conclusions. And Augustine, I think this is where the new BC comes in. Page 10 is the continuation of the BCs, the amendments to IPSAS 1. Page 11, part 3, these are the amendments to IPSAS 3. Page 12, part 4, amendments to other IPSAS standards. That's continued on page,
Renee.
Sorry, I didn't raise my flag soon enough. Back on amendments to IPSAS.
Can you move the mic a little bit
Yes.
closer, please?
Did we agree that we were going to bring back in a definition in IPSAS 3 that refers back to the definition in IPSAS 1, like do that cross-reference? It's here, right, that it would need to be inserted?
Yes, if I can jump in. Renee, apologies. That was another thing that I incremental that I added to the ED. So I have that cross-reference to IPSAS 1. Apologies for not highlighting that at the beginning.
So yes, Renee, we've made that change subsequent to the version that you have.
Okay, thanks.
So I think that takes us on to page 13, which is the amendments to IPSAS 19. Then page 14.
Renee, just check, are you still in or? Okay.
Page 15. And that wraps us up.
Okay, so we've got that one detail that just needs following up with staff. Other than that, are there any final comments from members, or are we content to move to a vote? Okay. So Ross, if you can take us through that.
Thank you. So as earlier in the week, I'm going to ask everyone in the room to please raise your flags, and for our 3 members online to please raise your hand or indicate that you agree. I can see Yoon and Yakub already have their hand up, but Abdullah, you have Abdullah's raised his hand. So everyone online is voting yes. So everyone in the room, if you vote for, please raise your flags. So 15 in the room, 3 online. So that's 18-4, no abstentions, no against. So the ED is approved.
Okay, thanks everyone, and thank you again to staff and those members who've contributed to turning this around. Do appreciate that. Do we need to? Did we agreed the other day? I think on the comment period of 60 days. Is that right? Okay. So is there anything else we need on that?
I don't believe so.
Great. Okay. No, thanks very much, everyone. We do, I think it was important. We did turn that around quickly, and it was a relatively short document. We do try and not to put pressure on members in terms of turning documents around like that during the meeting. So thank you very much for bearing with us on that. Good. So I think with that, we then move into the landscape update on sustainability climate-related disclosures. I think I'm right. It's time to formally welcome Alex Metcalf to the table. I kind of feel actually Alex is has been part of the team for some time, but it's great to have you with us. And we do really appreciate the funding from the World Bank that has actually made that possible. Alex.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much, Ian, for the welcome. And actually just extending that further, it is something where, for myself, I've been probably around the board now for in excess of 7 years in different iterations. So maybe that's why you feel that way, Ian. But a lot of that being actually on the other side of this. So, producing consultation responses and trying to be a global advocate for public sector financial reporting and good practices in PFM. And I think maybe just to start, actually, it's a great privilege for the first time for me to be sitting at this table, not just as part of its broader community in making that possible. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. And today, Karen and I are going to be talking to you about the progress that we're making on sustainability reporting for public sector and SRS ED1, climate-related disclosures. And we're really at an inflection point right now in terms of where we are in this project, where we've come up to the 28th of February with the ED closing, but actually a number of constituents coming to us saying that they'd like just a little bit more time to respond to this very important project. And we have, if you've looked at the website, you'll see the button now says, submit your late response as an option to just so we're still sending the message that we'd like things on time, but have provided that option. And those have been coming in. So we'll talk a little bit about where we've gotten to now in terms of that, but we're also going to step back a little bit just for those who are coming into the board, and it's been a little bit of time since we've been coming back into sustainability with the 120-day comment period, to review the CP, the consultation paper we had before, the decisions made up till now. We'll give you a summary of the outreach that we've undertaken as well. Talk about the creation of the sustainability implementation form and the excellent progress that's been made in developing that. What we've kind of called the infrastructure that's supporting us in delivering our work on public sector sustainability reporting. And then we're going to close off by having a short discussion around managing the consultation responses themselves. And that's something you'll have seen in the papers as well. Ross, sorry, I'm sharing. So thank you.
I just wanted to pause before we get into it, and you'll hear this throughout, but I think it's given we're sitting here in the World Bank offices and we've been able to take forward our work with great support from World Bank. I wanted to highlight a few people who've been around in and out of meetings all week, but for the last year and a half or more, been working with the team and helping expand the reach of our staff team by linking us up. And I think they're really almost feeling like colleagues, and we're part of their team and they're part of our team. So you see Patrick, who's sitting back behind Takeo. who's been working with us since the beginning to help get our grant completed. Bonnie Searoys, who's not online, but she's based in Fiji, so time difference is difficult, but she's been helping us since the beginning. Dimitri Gorfinkel, who's online today, but has been around all week, and I think most of you know Dimitri. Fantastic. And we have Srini, who's leading the PIFA Secretariat, who there's no event I've been to in the last couple of years where Srini doesn't show up and we have a great chat and talk about the public sector and the work of the PIFA Secretariat. And really is not just the resources we're getting from World Bank, but their networks, relationships, and the very constructive working arrangements they've put in place, having us here this week, the event on Monday. I think, I've been a staff member now for 12 years. I don't think there's ever been a time where I feel we're working hand in hand with the World Bank and an international organization the way we are with the World Bank. And I think there's a real opportunity here as we take this forward to continue to do that and make sure that when the standards are ready, we can help make sure they're used and adopted. So thank you wholeheartedly from the staff team, from the IPSASB to the World Bank and everyone who's helped contribute to this great relationship.
And that's a thanks from the board as well. It really, the teamwork is so important. So thank you everyone for that. Okay, Alex.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Ross. Oh, great to have Alex around with us on the team, especially this quarter. He's been doing a lot of work in our outreach and also in our sustainability support groups, especially in supporting in leading the Sustainability Implementation Forum, which he's done a lot of great work on, and he's going to walk you through that in a bit. So today, because it's been almost half a year since the board last talked about the climate-related disclosure standard, we just want to give you a refresher of all those decisions that were made back then when the board started developing this climate-related disclosure standard. And this is a really good time for us to come back to this, because the April meeting, it will be a lot of actual looking at those responses. There will be a lot of thinking going on related to the project. And this is a good place for us, the World Bank, for us to have this discussion as well, because the World Bank was where we actually, the IPSASB sustainability journey actually started. And it was in January 2022 when the IPSASB sustainability journey officially started. And that was when the World Bank published a report calling on the IPSASB to lead a global consultation on developing public sector sustainability reporting standards. And in response to this call from the World Bank, the IPSASB very, very quickly, very, very urgently, in May 2022, answered with a global consultation that proposes that the IPSASB, that there was a need for global public sector sustainability reporting guidance, and the IPSASB was the right organization, the right board to lead the development of sustainability reporting standards for the public sector. This is considering that IPSASB does have a lot of experience in financial reporting projects and does have an established governance and oversight process and a very robust due process as well. And the IPSASB does have a lot of expertise in the public sector, which makes it an organization that was well placed to lead the developments of sustainability reporting standards for the public sector. And the IPSASB in this consultation also proposed that because of the urgency of the climate topic, that the first projects should be on climate-related disclosures and general disclosure requirements. And because of the urgency of this topic and what we heard from stakeholders, this guidance should be developed as soon as possible.
Just before you move on, Karen, I think it's also worth saying that, as you said, that was a very rapid development period in terms of the consultation paper. But despite moving quickly as we have all the way through the project, we didn't skip steps in our due process. So, when the consultation paper was finalised during our New York meeting, we had the board had an in-camera day actually discussing that at that stage. But both the CAG chair and a representative of the PIC were with us that day, and we had obviously had discussions, particularly with the Public Interest Committee, on a couple of occasions before that during the development of the consultation paper. So we were really very conscious that we needed to make sure that at all stages we actually had followed our due process. So it was quick, but we did follow through exactly with our due process in terms of that approval. And it was quite an intense dialogue, but Public Interest Committee in particular were very supportive of us moving forward, and that was important, I think, because of the constituencies that they come from.
Thanks, Ian. And so during this consultation, we met with the IPSASB, managed to meet with a lot of stakeholders and get their views on this consultation on advancing public sector sustainability reporting, and was able to hold 5 regional roundtables across 4 regions: Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So it did represent a very diverse number of different people, a lot of different people representing different jurisdictions and regions, and also took CAG advice and for inputs. So this was in line with the IPSASB's due process. And in total, for the consultation paper, we received 70 written responses. And all these written responses actually represented also a lot of diverse regions, different organizations. And because this was the IPSASB's first project on public sector sustainability reporting, we got a lot of different stakeholders that we wouldn't normally see responding to our consultation paper. So sustainability was really important, and it was really important for the IPSASB in moving into this field, this sustainability landscape, and establishing itself within the sustainability landscape. So moving on, as part of the consultation paper in 2022, the IPSASB asked 5 preliminary views. Overall, as you see here in green, we received a lot of strong agreements from stakeholders. Our stakeholders strongly agreed that there was definitely a need for global public sector sustainability reporting guidance, and that the IPSASB was the right organization, has the right experience, the right robust due process to develop public sector sustainability reporting guidance. And next, the IPSASB it was appropriate for the IPSASB to apply this building block approach, which, if you remember from those discussions then, was to have an investor-focused approach, and then to build on it, considering that multi-stakeholder block, that multi-stakeholder focus as well. And the other preliminary review that the IPSASB proposed, which received a lot of strong agreements, was that climate-related disclosure should be the first topics that we address because of the urgency of the topic. And last, the respondents also agreed that it was important that we are supported by a number of key enablers, and that includes expert advice from the SRG, appropriate resourcing, and also maintaining dialogue with our other national standard setters. Because even though the IPSASB does have a lot of experience in setting financial reporting standards, it still needs to develop the expertise in sustainability reporting standards. And we'll move on to this in a bit, talking about our different expert groups who have been supporting us throughout this journey. So with this, we'll move on to a few of those key decisions that the board made in the development of the IPSASB SRS ED1. And as I said, this is a good time for us to review this now ahead of and to refresh the board's decisions ahead of the April meeting, where you'll actually start going into a lot of those responses. So this is the wheel diagram that you've probably seen when we developed the exposure draft. This is the approach that the IPSASB took to developing the SRS ED1, and it reflects all the scoping assumptions moving forward. So on the top left, we have consultation paper and feedback. As I have mentioned in the previous slide, it reflects that there is a lot of interest in the IPSASB undertaking this project, and that we should be, it was appropriate for us to take that building block approach. So having that investor focus, but also bringing that multi-stakeholder view. Next, on the top right, we have the IPSASB conceptual framework, which identifies concepts and provides that conceptual foundation for the IPSASB in developing standards. So it's provided that conceptual lens for us to consider different aspects, for example, qualitative characteristics, the objectives of reporting, which are decision-making and accountability, and users, the primary users of the report, and also, as you know, we've taken a couple of, we've used the conceptual framework throughout the SRS, for example, on our definition on materiality as well. Next, on the bottom right, we have the IPSASB standards, which represents the global baseline of sustainability reporting, and an increasing amount of entities across, especially in the private sector, are now aligning with the IPSASB, the IFRS S1 and S2, and it was important especially because of that building block approach. When we have this investor-focused building block in setting the IPSASB SRS ED1, it was important that we focus on interoperability with global standards, because sovereign bonds make up almost 40% of global bond markets, and it was important that there was this commonality in the key principles, that users could easily understand these key principles, and preparers make it easier for preparers as well. And last, on the bottom left, we have the GRI, which has provided us with a multi-stakeholder focus, and it has definitely provided us with several important aspects that the IPSASB considered and deliberated in building our sustainability reporting standard.
Sorry, Karen, just to step in there, one thing I think is quite appropriate, actually, hadn't struck me before, but actually the board decided to take that approach 2 years ago. So we were actually meeting at the IMF then, but that was the meeting 2 years ago when we decided to take that approach. So again, neat circularity there.
Yeah, now I'd like to add that this was our throughout the development until the publication, our approach was very consistent with these scoping assumptions that we originally decided to take in March 2023. And so moving on, the IPSASB also made a number of other key decisions. One of them was to build off international standards, as we proposed in the building block approach. So first, to build off the IFRS S1 and S2, building off that global baseline and increasing interoperability between private and public sector sustainability reporting standards. The next key decision was in September 2023, and this was on materiality. Then the board then discussed various definitions for materiality, including financial materiality, impact materiality, double materiality, dynamic materiality, to name a few. But with advice from the SRG, which is one of our sustainability expert groups, we should really bring materiality down to what is important for the users. And so the IPSASB decided to look to our conceptual framework for the definition of materiality and to align that with the conceptual framework. The next key decision that was made by the IPSASB was in March 2024. And that was to address the dual role of the public sector and the broader user needs in public sector sustainability reporting. And this was something that we heard from the consultation paper, something that we heard from those responses to that consultation paper that was made in 2022. And these stakeholders told us that there were two perspectives on how a public sector entity would interact with climate-related issues. First, from their day-to-day activities, and second, from their unique role in setting policies and regulations. And then eventually throughout the IPSASB's discussions, this had led to the two branches of addressing own operations, and on the other hand, climate-related public policy programs. And the last key decision here that I would give a refresher to the IPSASB on is the decision in May 2024, which is on reporting outcomes. So the IPSASB then had this discussion on impacts and outcomes, whether we should look at impacts or whether there was another more appropriate term for the IPSASB to look at. And back then, the IPSASB reviewed a number of different definitions on impacts. There were varying definitions on impacts even across the sustainability landscape. And so the IPSASB decided that instead it might be more appropriate to look at the RPG 3, which provides a focus on reporting on outcomes, which are the direct impacts of an entity's outputs, rather than looking at impacts. So in developing the exposure draft with advice from the CAG, the IPSASB has sought expert advice from our 3 sustainability reporting groups. The Sustainability Reference Group, the SRG, is made up of members who represent different international organizations, including the World Bank, the OECD, the IMF. We also have the Climate Topic Working Group, which is made up of national and international standard setters. So the Sustainability Reference Group provides us with more high-level advice, strategic advice on our sustainability project, and a Topic Working Group provides us with more technical advice on the climate-related disclosures project. And last, we have the Sustainability Implementation Forum, which was officially launched in November 2024. And Alex will brief you a bit more on the work that we've done on that, on the Sustainability Implementation Forum. And it is an open forum where we engage with implementation leaders from around the world, and we seek input from them on whether our standard is practical, whether it's feasible, whether it's implementable from their perspective as implementation leaders. So these sustainability expert groups are key to helping the IPSASB in obtaining advice from different sustainability experts and implementation leaders in developing the exposure draft. And they were really important in connecting us to, as well in outreach to different stakeholder groups after the publication of the ET, which Alex will bring you some more information on our outreach activities over the past quarter.
Great, thank you very much, Karen. So that takes us through the review of the key decisions that have brought us up to today. And I'll look to you at some point, Ian, just in terms of time of how far you'd like to go. But next on our list at this point is to look at the outreach and early feedback that we've had.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, that probably reminds me just to check whether there's any comments or observations members want to make on that. I mean, obviously, those of us that have been on the journey all the way throughout the last 3 years, I think that reminds us how much ground we've covered since, as somebody put it, at the start of 2022, we had no mandate, no plan and no resources. And I think, you know, it's amazing how far we have come during that time. You know, but you know, we've still got further to go, but I think it's just really important everybody sees the foundations, the strong foundations that we've gradually put in place as we've been through that process, and at each stage we've had input. Ross?
Yeah, I guess having been along the journey and kind of focused on it the last couple of years, you know, kind of forgot where we started, and looking back now as we get ready to get into responses, I'm happy to see that we've consistently been doing what we said we were going to do based on the response we got from the beginning. It's been guiding our work, and I think that's important to see, and actually that we've stayed pretty close to those foundational concepts from the project brief that were driven from what we heard in that original consultation, and that we're continuing to deliver on that. I think that's important for our stakeholders. And, you know, I kind of knew it in the back of my mind, but when we kind of went back and had a look, it was good to see that, you know, we've been doing what we've been saying we're going to do since we started.
Yeah, thanks. I do remember actually rereading the CP just when we were coming up to approval of the ED and thinking, we did a pretty good job there. You know, that we actually have done what we said we would do. So we'll just bring us right bang up to date then in terms of where the outreach process has been going.
Thank you very much, Ian, Ross. So yes, just quickly then, we're going to take you through both the outreach that was undertaken here and then the results of that outreach. And it's, I'm really pleased to share, this is actually part of my own journey coming into working with the IPSASB and the staff, is that we've had the highest level of outreach through this exposure draft than, as I understand it, than we have through any technical consultation project. So there's been a really good effort in collecting views, not just from the traditional constituents of the IPSASB, but from a really broad cohort to inform the exposure draft and our work towards a final pronouncement. And you'll see on this slide that broken down both in terms of the really broad geography that was covered in that outreach, but also looking at the division across different types of stakeholders who are engaged in this work. So we were supported, of course, in undertaking the roundtables, both that's supported through the World Bank funding, but also with a full array of other partners that you see listed on the slide here. So the Asian Development Bank, FOCAL, CAPA, and others who have played a really critical role in reaching this broad network of individuals to inform the outreach and consultation responses. And alongside that, there's also been really good engagement with these non-traditional communities of the IPSASB. And from my own perspective, I think that's a really important step in our own process to move towards a final pronouncement, is that there's been extensive engagement with, for example, the investor community. So you'll see some examples like the London Stock Exchange Group, UNPRI, GSG Impact. All of these are different investor communities that we're directly engaging with to understand their particular needs. And alongside that, there's, of course, a broader set of constituents, such as the Indigenous communities that we've been working very hard to engage with. And maybe a very quick shout out again to Patrick back here and working with small island developing states as another really important perspective that we want to make sure is brought into the standard setting process. So this really to say that through all of that, that outreach that's happened over the exposure draft period, that's led then itself to an unprecedented level of consultation response. And of course, that means, you know, there's a lot of work ahead for Karen and I that we're very excited to dive into and share with you. But I think that's a real testament to the success of that outreach over the comment period. And on this slide, then, what you'll see is a summation of the activity, both in terms of the roundtables that were held, covering around 104 and over 104 jurisdictions and 700 attendees. In all of those engagements, we were then making use of Slido, which is a digital platform to collect feedback across the SMCs, and that's given, as I understand it, then equal weight against what we hear back in terms of the consultations as well. And in addition to the outreach activity and what we heard back through Slido, both in person and virtual, is now these, as of the 20th, 89 written comment responses, but I can tell you there are additional commitments of that number going up a bit. So we'd expect this could be the low to mid 90s when we have our final number of consultation responses. And you'll see on this slide then that there's a really good distribution across geography that we're able to then engage with and bring back to you. Really, I know, I think for many of you, you're eager to get into the discussion of this, but I can say we're going to be talking about it next month. Right, so once we come to the April check-in, we'll be able to start that dive into the written responses, what we've heard back from the outreach, and to start to chart that way forward. And of course, in all of this, it's been very much made possible by the support of the World Bank. We've already done I think I've done our clapping already on that, though. But maybe it's a good place to hand back to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean, it is by some way our highest number of responses. You know, certainly, you know, on both those measures in terms of, you can see, you know, basically about 200 more than you know, our usual number of roundtables. And then I think, it is a technical document. Normally our technical documents, we probably get in the region of about sort of 50 or so responses on a good day. To strategies and so on, more general documents, it's maybe up around the 70s. So to get, into the 90s, it just shows the hard work that everybody has done. And it is, again, it's a team effort, because I know members and TAs have done a lot in terms of their local outreach events, and we've had a lot more input from all kinds of different bodies that we don't necessarily hear from. So, there's a lot to get through, but I think it's just a fantastic response. And it's brilliant to be, to be at the centre of that, as it were. Angela.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex and Karen. It's great to have a refresher at the beginning of the year, and especially preparing into the next session. And I just wanted to, something that I've been reflecting on the week, and maybe why we've got so many responses, and I imagine they're probably very thorough and comprehensive responses. And we've been having a discussion about primary users and our citizens, which is, I'll use that term instead of taxpayers and service recipients, but our citizens and our technical and our financial reporting products, our users. We know that, I think I've called it in the conceptual framework, a romantic idea that they actually make decisions based on our financial statements, voting every 3 years. And look, in theory and principle, that's true, but in practice for financial reporting, we know it's really their representatives or their interested bodies or parliament or even statisticians who are listed as not primary users. But we understand that in that world, but I find it just fascinating that in the world of sustainability, when we talk about our primary users, taxpayers, service recipients, which we'll call citizens, we have so many more interested users, actual active users making decisions, and so many representatives, many representative bodies, and I'm just learning about each meeting. I think I learn about a new representative in this space, and such enthusiasm and passionate from every citizen, every representative group to solve the climate change problem. And I've been reflecting on that in terms of what does that mean for us. And I guess I'm just really reflecting. It means that perhaps as a traditional standard setter board with a very inactive user base for financial and technical in some areas, not in all areas, but I think that sort of says to me, this is a big job for us, because there are a lot of people that want to use the standard, and also we need to talk to in consultation. So I just wanted to reflect on, it's quite different in terms of user needs, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a good comment. And again, I think it's going to be interesting to see the different groups that we've had input from. And I think then also we're going to need to think, and this maybe we'll go into some of the, beginning to look forward after the coffee break, actually, sort of not only about us moving forward on our journey towards the finalisation of the standard, but also how we communicate with our that user base, and also how we help them, because this, I think you've seen from the IPSASB, this is not about, just about, yes, it's important to have guidance, but it's also important to actually support people as they start to implement. And I think that fits with a lot of the discussions that we had, linking back to the, the words from John Bondal in terms of really thinking about our process and how we bring people in. And we've definitely done that so far, and we'll need to continue to do that. And then I think also the words from Samir Mossadegh, really reminding us about the support, that's going to be required as people come on the journey. So, I think yeah, you know, very much a different world. And in a sense, actually, that it does, without sort of giving too many confidences away, I think it does actually underline some of the early conversations that we had with the Public Interest Committee, where we were concerned that they might say, well, you've actually got limited resources and, you know, you've got a big financial reporting task ahead of you still. Therefore, no, you shouldn't step into this space. But actually, we got very strong encouragement that actually there was a real public interest need here. And actually that, you know, in the way that you just described, Angela, that actually this paradoxically may be a way of actually really spreading the knowledge of the board's work, and really, you know, therefore actually sustainability reporting might actually help raise the profile of accrual reporting at the same time. You know, I mean, obviously that's all anecdotal at the moment, but I think it's just, you know, really interesting and a real opportunity, and what's exciting about moving forward on this. Okay, so I think that's a good place just to pause at that point in time. So we'll go and get some coffee, and then if we can be back here at 5 past, and then we'll start to look at how we move forward. Okay, so that brought us up to date before the coffee break. So now let's talk about how we start to move forward.
Thank you, Ian. So yes, now let's move ahead, and we're going to talk a little bit about the sustainability implementation form. And this has been an important innovation that the IPSAS board's brought forward. And it's been a real area of focus for myself coming in to work with the IPSASB, and also with great support from Karen, but also from Renee, and the leadership that you've brought from the board with the SIF, and from Henning as well, from your work in supporting with that. And in doing this, we've been able to create this form that is really looking to deliver on a few specific objectives. And the first of those is very much to the advantage of this group, which is that we're looking to bring together preparers of public sector sustainability reporting to understand where they are in their own journeys, the level of maturity that they've achieved, and to bring the insights together from this preparer community to help with the board's deliberation, and to have that direct preparer insight coming into the discussions that we're going to have really in the weeks ahead, actually. And in doing that, it's been really impressive with the degree to which we've been able to bring together quite a large representation of preparers at different stages of maturity, representing different geographies and different types of entities as well. So a really good spread that I'll be able to show you in just a moment. But we also, in the discussions we've been having with what we call our implementation leaders within the SIF, they've also articulated a few other objectives that I wanted to share with you of what we're undertaking with the form. And another one, which I think is really just a great opportunity, is the fact that we'd look to build a community of practice out of this group. So the fact that there is this the kind of convening power of the IPSASB and this group that's come together, there'll be a real opportunity for them, and we've actually started to act on this already, Karen, of connecting individual preparers who are at similar points of their implementation journey, or might be dealing with similar issues on public sector sustainability reporting, for them to share their own good practice in looking to progress adoption and implementation. So it's been really exciting to see that element and that objective moving forward. And then finally, alongside that, we also want to be supporting the adoption and implementation itself. And for some of the preparers, some of these implementation leaders, they've articulated this as advocacy. So potentially developing case studies that we'd want to be able to bring to different jurisdictions, articulating the benefits of public sector sustainability reporting. For others, they're in a public sector context, a little bit more nervous about the word advocacy and holding back from that, sticking more to what's required of them in undertaking of their compliance around public sector sustainability reporting. But yes, lots of excitement of what we're able to do with this group, and I think there'll be many ways in which it can support board deliberations going forward. But what we've done to bring ourselves up to today is have the kickoff meeting that I think a number of you were involved in. So that was the start of the forum back in November. But since that kickoff, which was really kind of just setting the foundations of what we were looking to do, we then moved into one-to-one discussions with each of the implementation leaders, understanding where they were in their own maturity journey, understanding also what they were trying to get out of the forum so that we were actually on the same page of what we were trying to do. And then setting out the work program as well, so what we'd be looking to do together in the months ahead. Then alongside that, we did a really interesting first exercise of undertaking this work around a disclosure checklist. So we've circulated to all of the different implementation leaders a checklist of the disclosures that were required under the ED, so from today, and got a really good understanding both of what they're disclosing at the moment, but also in addition, the data that they have available. And so there's some interesting analysis that Karen and I are now getting into of understanding, well, what is the kind of state of play of the moment of data availability that exists today versus what level of disclosure are we seeing across these different types of entities and across different jurisdictions. And that actually brought us up very nicely to this first CIF meeting that we had in late February, so shortly before this meeting, where we did really more of a kind of benchmarking exercise with the group. So we undertook a number of discussions around the disclosure checklist and did a bit more of a deep dive around that with the individual participants. And for each group, because there are quite a few time zones that we're representing, so we do have to have multiple sessions to accommodate everyone. So in each group, we then had a case study as well. So to start in that sharing of good practice, and then finally gave them a forward view of the work program that we have ahead, where we're really going to focus on that first objective of the way in which their insights can be brought together to support your own deliberations in progressing public sector sustainability reporting. I think there's some really great opportunity for us here in undertaking this CIF approach. And what I wanted actually, I'm going to focus, I think, on this one as the final bit on the CIF, which is just giving you a sense of the geographic distribution here of the implementation leaders who've signed up. I'm not sure if it's too small for you to see on the slide there, but it gives you not too bad, yeah. Gives you a sense of the jurisdictions and the types of entities that are represented. But what you might also spot in this is that there are still a small number of gaps that we'd like to fill here too. So that there is a request, if you'd like, from staff to the board here, if there's any additional individuals within your own networks where you think they'd be appropriate as an implementation leader participating in the CIF. Be very happy if there's, for example, additional representation from East Asia. We'd also be keen to see representation from Middle East and from the Caribbean region as well. So this is something where I think we'll be hearing more about the CIF in the meetings ahead, but one where at this point, what we're planning to do is to have meetings typically in advance of each of the in-person board meetings of the CIF. So before the board's coming to meet and deliberate on the particular issues of SRS ED1, the focus would then be of the CIF in advance to provide you with the insights from that preparer community to help in progressing our discussions in that way. And maybe the final thing that I'll say on this, unless there's any questions from the group on it, is that this is, of course, the sustainability implementation form. So today, for the moment, we're very much focused on SRS ED1, but there could be a point at which the head kind of starts to look up and we're thinking about how that would evolve in terms of the future work program that we've heard more about in the week. And potential future projects as well. So if this is successful, is demonstrating value, there could be kind of a longer work program ahead on that.
Thanks, Alex. I think that is a really important innovation. I mean, Renee, you were chairing that. I don't know if there's any additional observations you want to make on those first meetings. Certainly, I participate in one of them, and you know, I found it fascinating actually. Renee.
Yes, I agree. There was really good interest on it, good participation. There's one session I missed, but I think that there was good engagement in both. What is interesting is that they are reporting already. They do have data in many areas, not everywhere, of course. It's a mix of different maturities, different scope of what is being reported, but I think that is one of the very interesting insight is that most of them are not starting from nothing. They are doing various reporting already, and they do have some data. So I think it's very insightful. It will be useful to continue the conversation with them in the future.
Angela.
Thanks, Alex. And I'm not sure about if this is the right time to ask this question, but I am interested in how, I think they're an excellent group, an excellent initiative. And B, I'm really looking forward to their insights when we deliberate the issues when they arise. So I just want to understand how the board will receive that in a process sense, those kind of rich, diverse views that I suspect, given the region and different levels of maturity. So I think there's a real intelligence and a richness that would be valuable for all the board, but obviously we don't have the time to be there. So I'm interested in the staff's process and thinking of how to ensure the richness and the balance, because I can imagine on balance, you know, they might not all agree with a particular disclosure, but so it would be good not only to have sort of, you know, there wasn't a clear majority on whether that disclosure mandated was appropriate, and there were kind of two main camps or three main camps, you know, that kind of richness rather than just from that group, this is the view, because I don't think that's really not really the point of the group in a way. So it's really that governance around how you look to present, and potentially are you using use of any kind of technology like recording them, not for public, but then to use AI to summarize the dialogue, and then there are tools I think that can summarize the key points. You know, because I think the other side of it is, as a financial reporting expert, I'm also learning. And so not only do I find it useful ahead from a governance perspective, but also just from a personal education perspective to be useful in my responses. So just interested in the process of the feedback.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Angela. So then maybe the first thing I'd say on that is that this is an open forum to all of the members around the table. And I know that's a commitment of time. So if you do want to attend and participate in the discussions, that is an option open to you. I appreciate that that's not going to be an option that everyone's going to be able to take up, though, too. That's yeah, and maybe, well, you know, saying that you might be sleeping sometimes, Angela, but we are running multiple meetings too, and accommodating Oceania in those multiple meetings. So you know, there's a good opportunity to hopefully have your engagement there. In addition to that, I think it is a good point on the technology side, and I know that's one that staff have been talking about, of how to best capture insights and share that effectively with the board. I might mention in relation to that, though, that we have agreed that this will be a Chatham House discussion for the SIF members, and that's, I think, just to have a really open and robust dialogue for the group. And that's something that we'd be setting out in advance of each meeting, to say that this is something where it wouldn't be that we'd be coming to the board and to public fora identifying the individual preparers, but it would at least be able to give you a sense at an aggregate level of, and non-attributed, of what that looks like as an analysis and summary. But Ross, it looks like you want to come in too.
Yeah, it's just as well. I think, again, this is a process that sits below what's happening here at the board. So any decisions taken will come up through the board and be documented in a paper. So it's brand new. We don't know exactly how we're going to use it yet. We don't know the value we're going to get. But we've got a balance between how much resources we put into supporting this and administering it. And again, we've got enough work to do. We're not looking to add work for the sake of work. But in terms of designing this, we've designed it the same way design any group. So we've got some board representation. So we're very lucky to have, great engagement from Renee, but also Henning, who's been very helpful with us, working together, joining the meetings. As Alex said, we're always happy to have more on the boat if any members, TAs have a significant interest, want to be involved. And many of the jurisdictions sitting around the table already have representatives there in their personal capacities with the various entities that are joining. So I think there's a fine balance between making it useful and how we manage it in terms of resources. And I think the value of this will grow over time. So initially we thought maybe we'll just use this until we have a standard, but I think it's becoming clear that maybe this might become even more useful when we do have a standard and you want to continue to have a dialogue. So how are these principles working in practice? Where are you struggling? What does the board need to think about as maybe some early additional standard setting? In the same way the IPSASB is using its implementation group to get feedback. So I think, and again, back to the earlier of the presentation, if you go back to the beginning when we said we were going to do this, the narrative in the proposal in the May 2022 consultation paper was we're going to move with haste. We're going to move quicker than we normally move because that's what the market wants. We got support for that, but there was a but the board won't just leave it. We'll continue to monitor, look to support it. So I think that's been the consistent narrative going back to the beginning. That's what we had support for, and that's what we'll continue to do. So, this is definitely an ongoing journey. It doesn't stop when the first standard's out.
Great. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Renee, you want to come in and then I'll go to Karen?
Yes, I was just having a thought about the checklist, the responses to the checklist and the summarization of this. I see that feedback collected through that tool similar to responses that we get to a document for consultation. So I'm thinking of board members. I think that you're already thinking in how to bring it to the board, and I think it will be probably a summary of the checklist analysis, but I would expect that board members will be able to look at the more detailed analysis that you've done to the extent that they want to, because I think, as Angela said, there's going to be a lot of richness in what we hear from them. And while you're going to incorporate that in your issue papers, like you do CAG input, for example, I think that having that checklist analysis is going to be useful for members that need to dig deeper into maybe the feedback. So just a thought that I'm having right now.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. I agree with you. I mean, just obviously I wasn't actually leading that session that I attended, but actually just seeing that feedback anonymized, I think would be really helpful for the board. So that sounds like a great suggestion to me. Karen.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's probably just building on some of those comments. I think we are all learning. So I think having resources available to us to help us learn is a good thing. And recognizing that this is evolving in terms of how it gets used. I think we just need to make sure that there is a check that if this starts to feed into due process in some way, shape or form, that we recognize that that's what it's doing and deal with it appropriately. It may never do that, but I think, as Renee was saying, if it becomes similar to kind of like the CAG in terms of input, which is part of due process, then we would need to think about it. So obviously there's no answers as yet because you don't know how you're going to use it, but kind of just flagging that to kind of keep at the back of the mind in terms of how this does evolve and where it fits into how this develops and evolves.
Ross.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think any of these activities we operationalize, whether it's one-to-one discussions, outreach, it all sits under the due process umbrella. and any decision taken on any project that goes forward has to be made at this table. So that's the due process check. So it'll end up in a board paper. The board will make a decision based on that. It goes in an exposure draft, or it goes in responses to the exposure draft. And just to be crystal clear, I think when we start going through responses in April, the direction we go on the project and where we go is going to be based on the 90 plus responses, written responses, the analysis of those responses and the discussions at this table based on what we've heard from constituents and where we go. There's going to be nothing happening, side conversations. We heard this in the SIF and we're going to go in a different way and not go the way the comments told us. But helping us understand what we heard in those comments and what these application issues are, the SIF can give us lots of value, but there'll be nothing happening at this board table that doesn't driven by the responses. And I think it's very, very important that everybody keeps that in mind, that we're going to have a lot of responses and a lot of richness, and we're going to have to go through that. We're going to have to make decisions on how to move the project forward based on what we've heard, not our perceptions of what my particular view is or anyone else's, but what the board thinks collectively based on the responses once we go through it and provide you with the analysis. And again, all the comment letters we have will be made publicly available on the website. All of our papers will be analyzed and publicly posted. So there'll be nothing that happens in terms of final decisions that isn't completely in the open and completely in line with due process. That's how we operate. Full stop.
Thanks, Ross.
Great. Well, that's a very good segue, actually, to the next slide, Karen, because that's, as you see here, our IPSASB due process slide. And this is, well, I don't think to spend as much time given where we've just gone on this, but maybe just to build on the fact that we did hear from the PIC update at the beginning of the week and John Blondell, particularly speaking about public sector sustainability reporting, the fact that we're likely to see a larger constituency responding to this particular ED. And that as a result of that, it's going to be really crucial that the IPSASB demonstrate to that broad base of respondents that we have adhered to due process, as I think we're articulating really well at this point here. So just to give you a quick overview of this alongside this PIC oversight, in terms of where we are now in progressing with due process, we've covered through to the project identification, the development approval of the brief, and of course, now we've developed the exposure draft and had it out for the 120 days. And ahead of all of us is now going to be the analysis of this really robust response that we've had back, consultation with the CAG that next meets in June of this year, and then looking forward to the development of a final pronouncement and questions of whether we need a re-exposure, things to address later in the effective date as future discussions for the board. And maybe just to remind everyone in terms of the timeline of this, the view from previous meetings was to work towards the very end of 2025. But to do that, it's going to have to very much be within this due process. And this is going to be right at the forefront of, I know, for staff's mind, and I know for all of you as well, as we progress towards that final pronouncement. With that, then, I'm happy to hand over to you, Ken.
Thanks, Alex. So for the next stage of our project, the board will, for 2025, the board will really be focusing on working towards a final pronouncement of the climate-related disclosure standard. And it's really important for the board to realize that finalizing the standard only marks the starting point for public sector sustainability reporting. For even though, as Alex said in the SIF, a lot of entities there have shown us that there is some work that is going on there. They do have some data for some of those disclosures. For a lot of other entities, it is only once that we've finalized those key principles that we're asking for, will a lot of them actually start thinking about what their next step is in regarding sustainability reporting and integrating sustainability into their own operations and into their thinking about public policy programs. So it's not only in terms of making those disclosures, it's also in making those broader entity-wide changes that will enable them in advancing their sustainability processes and their sustainability reporting. So that's, for example, whether it's integrating climate-related risks and opportunities into their governance and oversight structures, whether it's optimizing their IT systems and whether they have existing tools to get ready for greenhouse gas data collection across the entity, which having worked in that field, I know it will take some time for some entities to get that ready. And also whether that's integrating climate considerations into their budgetary processes, budgetary discussions, and decision making. So it's crucial for the IPSASB that we finalize the standard in a timely manner, and that's what we promised to our stakeholders. That's what they asked for us. They asked for us to do in response to our consultation paper when they told us that we should develop the standard with haste, so as soon as possible. And so here we looked to the IPSASB for some guidance on how we can develop the standard, both in a timely manner, but also to better support entities in their sustainability reporting journey, especially in how they implement and how they integrate sustainability reporting into their entity, throughout the entity. And we think there is a potential for us to learn from the IPSASB experience following the development of the IFRS S1 and S2, where their stakeholders told them, and this was reflected in both their feedback statement on the IFRS S1 and S2, and also on their feedback statement on their consultation on agenda priorities, which determines what projects they should take next. And their stakeholders very clearly told them that supporting implementation of IFRS S1 and S2 should be a top priority for the IPSASB. And we were also able to have a quick chat between staff with the IPSASB staff last week to learn a bit more about their journey in supporting implementation of IFRS S1 and S2. And that conversation for me really reflected the importance of supporting implementation. It's really important that we take entities along in their sustainability reporting journey because especially in the sustainability reporting standard, which is so new for a lot of entities and will require a lot of work, a lot of entity-wide changes in really integrating sustainability within the entity rather than only making those disclosures, which is, I guess, is what we ultimately want to drive at the IPSASB in advancing public sector sustainability reporting. So it's something that is very new, both to the board and to a lot of entities. And obviously, we don't want to be setting standards that no one will be using. So what this means for the IPSASB is, because we've been hearing from some of our initial outreach that there are some implementation related concerns. For example, on capacity building is one of the concerns. The data availability is also something that we've heard from some entities. So we're bringing this in March. We're bringing implementation of the implementation topic to the board in March, because we will need to start thinking about this now. We'll need to be planning resources for this. And it's important for staff and for the board that we have that consistent understanding on the way forward as we start analyzing responses. And so in doing so, staff will be taking an approach where essentially we will be having two different buckets in analyzing consultation responses. So for responses that are related to the key principles of the standard, if we got something that's wrong in principle, then we will address this. We will address this now. But if it is an implementation related issue, we'll propose to put those comments into another bucket and address those through an ongoing phase. And we will be having the Sustainability Implementation Forum, the SIF, throughout the process, and hopefully throughout the implementation phase of the standard as well, to ensure that the standard is implementable, is practical, and whether further staff guidance or further examples will be needed from our side. This means still that this IPSASB will still be doing a full response analysis in line with the due process. This will still be, we will still be doing analysis of all the responses. It will still be a comprehensive response analysis using the NVivo software. But there will just be different times at which we address different things for the next stage of the project. And it's important as a reminder to the board that supporting implementation is something that we said we would do when we started the project. So it's important that we both address the need for this standard as soon as possible, but also bring entities along in this journey. And it's important for the staff now, before we start analyzing responses, to start thinking about how we can take this effectively and efficiently as the board and use resources, having the best use of our resources now. So in terms of next steps, I know a lot of board members are very keen to know about the analysis of responses on the SRS 81. Don't worry, you will have 6 meetings to go through it. Before you will have 6 meetings to go through it before the planned approval of the final standard, which we're aiming for the end of 2025. So the board will have a total of 6 meetings, both in person and check-in online meetings. Hopefully you can join us on that to discuss, deliberate, and finalize those key principles ahead of the planned approval of the standard. With that, I'll hand over to the chair.
Thanks, Karen. And I'm trying to work out whether it's actually Karen or Angela was first. So,
thank you, Karen, for the high-level summary of the way forward. It was something that you mentioned, which is a little different from our financial reporting analysis. I'm very pleased to hear that the staff are doing the full analysis as they would, and I was very excited to hear about your new tools, just given the size of the responses, the number. You mentioned that there would be a allocation in addition to the full response review. I think I heard there's an allocation between what maybe are principal issues versus implementation issues. I just want to understand who's making that decision. And I just wanted to reflect that sometimes in financial reporting projects, an issue of principle actually comes through in a response as a implementation issue. And I just, it's my experience from the financial reporting side that what one person thinks is an implementation issue is in fact a symptom of a principal issue. So I'm just interested in why we need to make the split. B, who's making the decision, and is the board involved in that? But I guess overall, I do accept and agree, regardless of how you manage the responses, I absolutely agree. I think there is a really significant role for the board in implementation alongside the standard.
Ross, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it's a good point, and don't disagree whatsoever. So staff will do the initial analysis, and what we mean by points of principle are things that relate directly to something we need to put in the standard. But we know from our discussions around the world, we're getting things like, for example, scope 3 is hard in the public sector, and we're not going to be able to solve that problem on day one in our standard. We're not going to have a new way to make scope 3 easy in the public sector. It's also hard in the private sector. So we'll respond to the responses we have, but there's going to be things that we're going to have to work with other organizations on a go-forward basis that might take a couple of years. So we might not get the full answer to the full comment to finish in our standard, but we're going to have to use that implementation phase to work with WRI, for example, to say, hey, why don't you guys develop some guidance on greenhouse gas inventories and take into account the public sector, because everything you have in scope 3 now is very corporate related. So our standard's going to rely on what's there. We're not going to be able to write the greenhouse gas protocol ourselves, but there's going to be many issues like that. And we know from our discussions in the ED, there were things like that where we want more. So it's just, how do we separate things that this board can control and get in the standard. So we have a usable standard that goes out versus some issues that are beyond the scope of what this board can deal with, and we're going to have to work with in the future. So that's the whole thinking behind it. And it's not that different than what we do in other projects as well. So, for example, we're doing an update of our pension accounting standard, and we find something that relates to actuaries that we want to think about. Well, we might get the pension accounting right, but we might have to talk to the actuaries or the valuation community and measurement. So that's what we mean by the split. And again, staff will do the analysis, but this board makes the decisions. So if they don't think that's an issue that is dealt with in implementation and there's something we can do in the principles, we'll talk about that. We'll solve the principal issue. We'll get it in the standard.
Thanks, Ross. So Karen next, then Mike, Camira, and Patricia.
Thank you, Chair. I had a very similar point to Angela. I mean, when you've got a lot of responses, you're going to have to find a way of categorizing those to make it manageable. I'm just not sure at this point that we know what are going to be the appropriate buckets to put it in. So signing up to a principle that we need to find ways of categorizing the issues so that we can consider how they get taken forward, I'm comfortable with. But specifying what those buckets look like, and you may well be right, it's principle and implementation that are the right buckets. But signing up to that right now just feels a bit uncomfortable without any other information to support it. But I agree, you're going to have to find some way of categorizing this stuff, I think, to probably be able to make sense of it. So yes to the principle, but I think we probably need to come back and look at what are the buckets once we've got the information. Yeah.
I mean, I think to your point, Karen, we've got to find a way of moving forward on this, and actually it fits entirely with the way that we've approached this project, which is all the way through. We've sort of looked at what we've done in the past, we've built off that, and we've developed ways of approaching this. And I think the difference on this one is the fact that, yes, in the past we provided implementation guidance alongside the standard. I think we know that's, in some cases that's not going to be possible, or, it may be the nature of the implementation guidance is different and so on. So I think that's where we have to allow ourselves to actually work this forward. And one of the things that it's actually reminded me very strongly of personally is when I started off actually the development of whole of government accounts in the UK, and basically I was given a copy of the scope and study report and a desk and a PC and told to go away and deliver. And one of the things that I did in starting to develop, because I had to start to put some things in place, actually was I did a summary, a sort of block diagram of the broad areas that I thought we were going to need to work in, and prioritize that between some things that we needed to work in to begin with and some other areas that we were going to, we need to do something there in the future, so that everything was visible, but it just gave you a way of focusing on what the problem was in hand. And I think the similar thing is going to happen here, that, we know there's probably going to be more requests for guidance on materiality, for example, or as Ross said, not that the principle of the GHG protocol is wrong, but we're going to need more guidance on public sector and so on. So we're going to need to sort of think about it from the point of view of, okay, we think there's some more work that's going to be needed there to operationalize this, but it's going to have to happen over a longer time frame. And just to have, but I think to your, to what you're saying, Ross, I think in working it forward, it's important, firstly, for the board and then for our stakeholders, that there's absolute clarity about the fact that we've received the feedback, we've understood it, and that we're actually actioning all of it. And then we're absolutely clear about the way we do that. And I think we're going to have to learn as we go on this. I think staff will need to actually do some initial analysis and say, here's what we think we're hearing, here's where we think we get agreement, here's where you know, we're going to need to work more on this. Here's something that we're not going to be able to do anything about at the moment. But, you know, so, and, you know, there's other things about how does all of this sit in the stakeholder landscapes. There's going to need to be communication and all of those kinds of things. So I think all the way through, what we're going to need as a board is actually that visibility about where's this being dealt with and how's it being dealt with and what are we doing now, but we haven't lost that, all that kind of thing. Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of where I'm coming from in terms of sort of keeping it flexible, because whilst you might think about 2 buckets right now, once you start going through it, it might be pretty evident that you need 6 or whatever it might be. You know, so I think what I'm saying is I don't think you should be, having had this discussion, be kind of rigid about the two buckets. I think you do need to categorize, and I think that needs to be led by the responses that you're getting. And, you know, if sometimes having more buckets is a good thing, and then you can combine them together, whereas having too much in too few buckets makes it harder to take it forward. So I just encouraging the staff to be kind of flexible about that and to think about it as you go through, like as you code it into different topics and stuff like that, is to be informed by that.
Yeah. I think that's right, but I think the main principle is it's absolutely transparent where things are going and what we're doing with it, and let's concentrate on the issues and the feedback we're hearing rather than is it 4 buckets or 3 buckets or whatever. Okay, so I've got Mike and then Camira and then Patricia.
So thank you, Chair. Really being impressed on the number of comments we received or will receive. And I've got a question on the analysis of that, because I think those responses are not just 2 or 3 pages letters. I assume that's much more, and so it's kind of type of, let's say, golden source with a high value. And I think the value of those letters, it's not only for the for decision of the board, it's only, I think, for my personal daily work. So I'm quite interested whether, I don't know whether Vivo would allow any type of, you know, tracking to see if it comes to a certain SMC, to follow that in certain response letters, whether you have export function or not. But I would be highly interested whether you can offer, I know, people table or something like that later on. Thank you.
Ross.
So I think Dave, I was out of the room, but I think Dave did explain a little bit about NVivo. But NVivo is a great tool, and it's not new. We've been using it for, I think, 6-7 years now. And it's a tool developed for academics to put in academic research and journals and to go through large amounts of information. And it basically creates a database where you can tag the information however you want. So again, and just to be clear, we're not going to have 2 buckets of information in Vivo. We'd go through and we tag the SMCs and the feedback we get. Then we identify other themes that come up that have nothing to do with SMCs so that we can bring them together through each of the comment letters. So you put the comment letters in Vivo, you read the minute, and it's got the ability to tag all the information. Then you get to the end and you have attributes for each response. Then you can slice and dice like a pivot table with numbers, what we've heard. So SMC1, let's hear what all the respondents who had disagrees with SMC1 said. And then it will pull that together in a report, and staff goes through it and we work through it. So we want to know what preparers thought about SMC2. So we go through and we go back and we go through and we look through it. So we have a lot of ability to how we analyze the information in Vivo once we go through, and the staff work in Vivo to do our analysis. And, you know, you can go really deep on a topic and you can tag things, and you can even tag little edits. Hey, there's an edit. And then we go through, pull a report with 100 pages of edits for staff to go through and clean things up. So it really maximizes the efficiency of how we go through responses, but also helps us work through. So we've had, for example, a task force sometimes where we sit in the task force room and we have NVivo on the screen, and we'll pull up SMC1 and we'll work through it with a task force on something. So like, it is a tool that gives us lots of flexibility in how we analyze and efficiency, and it gives us a lot of information we can output. So if you called up the staff and said, hey, I really care about SMC1. I want to know this, this, and this. Can you pull that for me? I'm going to read it on my own. We can do that. Like, it's nothing. We're trying to minimize what we ask the board to do by doing the analysis and putting it in the papers. If you want to go deeper, you want something from staff on anything, we're happy to do it. But we're trying to make sure you don't have a 400-page paper as well, because we're balancing what we hear of we're a volunteer board. We need to show up and make decisions. And, you know, we've got 3 months and 2 staff that are going to be working full time from now till June to go through this. So, you know, that's how the sausage is made.
Yeah, and that's where the staff are working on our behalf as the board. You know, as you said, Ross, you know, Alex and Karen are going to be full time on this. So you know, I think it's really important. I think the next few weeks we just let them get on and do the job in hand, and then we can start you know, looking at what comes out of that. Camira and then Patricia.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a clarification question on what is the proposal here. So this means that from that huge amounts of comment letters, so staff will identify those comments that are related to implementation issues. Let's say, what would happen if there is a strong pushback to following on Ross' example on Scope 3 emissions disclosures? What would be our way forward? Would we still continue with the Scope 3 emissions and then just communicate somehow that those will be further researched and analyzed as part of the implementation process, so that we are able still to come out with a standard by the end of the year and people know that we are still working on that? So just for understanding. And my second question is, what kind of implementation support are we planning to offer as a board? Are we talking about implementation guidance or training materials or staff Q&A, or what do you have in mind for that? Thanks.
Probably any or all of the above, actually. Ross.
So I think great questions. I would say let's wait till April and see how we categorize it. I don't want to talk ifs and buts. I think it's not that helpful. And I say the same thing for the implementation phase. We might start collecting ideas and things what we're going to do, but we don't have a plan for that yet because we don't have a standard. And again, if there's maybe one thing I've learned from going to talk to people, it's really difficult to talk about how you can implement something when you haven't figured out what the standard is. So we've got an ED, so that's helping. We're getting clarity and they're getting areas there's noise and there's things we're going to have to fix. But people still need that standard. And it's on this board to deliver it. Now, there's got to be the right balance of time to deliver it. You know, we take too long, the board will get criticized for not taking it seriously and getting it done. Move too quick, we'll get criticized for missing the big issues. So there is a balance, but we're not going to get that answer today. And if this is the timeline as of today, we haven't looked at the responses. As we start to look at the responses and we see what we're finding in the comments, we'll have to revise the timeline. So it's just, we're just trying to give the board the thinking so you guys can start to get your head around what we have to do in the next 9 months, so that when we bring you analysis, you're not saying, well, I don't remember what was in the CP and I don't remember why we're doing this. So we're trying to get the education going, get the board back into the topic, because it has been on the agenda for 6 months. So that's the real purpose of the discussion today. We're not making any big decisions and pinning the board down on anything, telling you what we're thinking about as we go in to do it. So we can hear from you and go and do a good job and bring you a good response analysis, because we don't want to be the barrier to moving things forward.
And I think, you know, really the purpose of today's session is so that everybody's up to speed, so that when we get to the check-in, actually you've got a good appreciation of what's gone into the first site that you're going to get as board members, of what our constituents have said and what's emerging from that. And that session is going to be about actually, you know, just actually, you know, getting some initial reactions, some initial thoughts on that. And okay, yeah, that's reasonably clear. We need some more thinking about that. What do they mean by that? Those kinds of questions. So there's going to be no, you know, we're not asking for decisions coming out of that check-in meeting. It's actually just to get everybody into that sort of landscape of what's going on. Then we'll move on into June, and based on, you know, what the responses are saying, but also what the board's you know, said, what the questions and all that kind of thing, then we'll, you know, it's one of these things where this process will be about, okay, there's a lot of information out there. What are the outlines that we're beginning to see emerging from that? And actually then start to take some decisions you know, and as you start to say, right, okay, well, here's some pegs in the ground, and basically June's going to be about putting those pegs in the ground. Okay, that enables us to move forward, and okay, we've seen that, right? Okay, now we can think about that and just move forward in that measured way. So it was really to make sure we're all equipped with the kind of, okay, this is how we're thinking about it. Now let's show you what's come out of this, and let's start to make some sense of what's going to be an incredibly rich picture. We know that, you know, it's a great problem to have, but that's how and you know, then we'll begin to make some decisions about how we move forward in the June meeting is the idea. Patricia, and then Scott in terms of first round of responses.
Thank you. I think I have similar concern, but IPSAS standard has a structure, main principles, AG, illustrative example, implementation guidance. These parts are used for specified principles or clarified principles. In this phase, proposed ongoing phase is similar or not. My question is because in some moments, we decide that this is a standard set project. This is not a standard set of project. A standard set of project is responsibility, our responsibility as a board, but some of the tools is not responsibility of the board. And I would like to understand what means, what is the meaning of the proposed ongoing phase, specifically what is implementation in this case? Is implementation is part of the board work or not? This is my first question. In the second question, we have about 3 weeks to analyze for the staff analyze the responses. Do you think it is feasible to analyze our responses and have the map of the main, or you intend to, it's better to have because you have 2 different approaches in DG, one for own operations, other for PPP, and then how to manage this, or I think that the requirements about PPP are more challenging. If we start with more challenging area or not, I would like to understand better the next steps. Thank you.
So would I. But we don't have a crystal ball. We have the responses. We have to go through them. We do think we can get a first cut through the responses by April to get an idea, but that doesn't mean we'll be done. And there'll need to be a deeper dive on many of the issues. So I think we're going to get through everything. We're going to tag and highlight the main issues. We're going to share those with the board. But I by no means think we're going to be fully done our response analysis by June. And that's not the purpose. What we want to do is get a process and get something started, because we don't want to be inefficient and have staff just sitting, spinning our wheels and not bringing you a plan and trying to execute it. So I think let's focus each meeting on what we bring and what we discuss and where we go next, and not get too far ahead. So I don't think that's a good use of time to guess on what we might do. And like, so for example, I won't guess on whether there's going to be support for PPP or own operations or what I think. I know what I heard when I went and talked to people, but I haven't read the comment letters. We need to be driven by what we hear in the letters, not what we think today, because all of us have certain people we've talked to or people in our own jurisdiction, but we've got 90+ comments from all around the world that have given us good information. That's what we need to be discussing when we take it forward. So I don't think we should be, in our own minds, making our own minds up before we've got into the analysis. So let's just wait. Let's see what's in the analysis and make our plan on where we go on this, as I think that's important. To your other question on the implementation phase, this is a new type of project for us. So this would be something on our work program where we would continue to have staff support, but it would be more of the non-standard material that we've worked with other partners on in the past. And give you a little bit more on that as we get closer to that being a project and we see what issues are sitting in this bucket or buckets related to implementation. Again, it might be many buckets. It might be stuff we decide we identify that we're not going to do. There might be things we identify that we want to do. We just think we need to do it to move it along. This is new. We don't do this today on our financial reporting projects. But we're taking a different approach because we want to make sure the standard gets used. And I think we're learning from watching what the private sector's done in this. And again, just last week, we had a call with the ISSB staff, and they told us that it's a lot of work and the implementation is really important. They're learning all the time. They've already started to update their initial standards because of things they've learned on this. So this is an investment in making sure people can use it. And I think the board kind of pre-committed itself to do it in this manner back in 2022 when we said we're going to do it. So that's all we're saying at this point. Everything will come through the board. It'll all be board decisions. But we're not in any position to make any decisions yet. We just got to work through it.
I think there's very much a phrase that we have in the UK is keep calm and carry on. And it is that, I mean, I've been in this situation so many times before with standards that you don't know, there will be a way forward. You need to keep working on it. And the way forward will become clear. I think that's part of the reason, if you look back how far we've come a huge distance. Yes, we've got further to go, but there will be a way forward. We found our way through a lot of difficult issues as a board. I'm not just saying that. I do honestly believe that we will make it. There will be a way forward, but at the moment, we just can't give a detailed plan because we just need to do that analysis and see what we've got support for, what we haven't got support for, and what that means. Okay, Scott and then Andrew on the first round of responses.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. I want to echo Karen's saying I'm not sure how many buckets are, but I think the concept is absolutely spot on. And you're probably going to have another bucket that says not relevant. Okay, so because we know how we get those comments, right? So that may be a bucket. But if I could just do a commercial, I just want to remind you the Sustainability Reference Group is going to be meeting on May 14th. And we know one of the agenda items is we're going to be talking about responses. So we'd encourage you to listen to that, to hear, again, from experts on that other item. The other item I do want to highlight, and it hasn't been mentioned, but it was in our briefing paper, is that Appendix A in 13.2.4 really refers to 2 pages of guidance, implementation guidance issued by IPSASB. So I anticipate a lot of the implementation questions we're going to get have already been answered, okay? And they're going to be sitting in the IPSASB. So again, we're not on this journey by ourselves. By leveraging off S2 the way we did, we've got all the help coming from the IPSASB, which is going to, I think, and that may actually be another category here if you kind of think about those implementation things that's already been addressed and those that have not. But anyway, that helps me feel a little better about the implementation side, as we're not going on this journey alone because of the path that we've gone on. Those are resources that are working on it on this way. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Scott. And I think that's going to be one of the things where, it may well be that guidance doesn't say specifically this applies to a municipality or a school or a hospital, but actually the principles are pretty good. And, so it may well be that there's some, something in the interim that we say, well, okay, we will come back and look at that more specifically later, but it's good enough to start off with at the moment. So that whole thing about don't let the best be the enemy of the good as we move forward, which I think we've heard that all the way through, and it's certainly what IPSASB has done. Andrew.
Thanks. So just 2 questions. The one is my understanding of the coding that's going to happen in Viva. We're going to have 2 staff members doing it now, which I guess is potentially different to previous projects where you've got 1 staff member doing it. So my concern is just around, do we have a process to ensure consistency of coding between the 2 individuals? So is there a review process or just what's happening along that line? And the second one doesn't actually relate to responses, but I mean, to Scott's point, there's always a double-edged, well, there is a double-edged sword to everything. So there is the benefit of having the ISSB helping us. But because they're now potentially updating their guidance, my understanding is it's making some of the principles easier or more relaxed because of the implementation challenges. And I just wondered, do we have a plan to pick that up and review it as we're developing our final standard? Thanks.
So on the in vivo, just to be clear, we can only have one file. So they'll have to be reviewing in the same file. So both of our staff members will go through all the comment letters in vivo, and they'll have different things they tag, and they'll be working in the same file together. So, you know, inevitably, if I go through and code something, it might be different, but it's not like I can't see the coding that Alex has done or Karen's done. So I think in terms of that, I'm not super concerned we're going to end up in a weird place, and we're going to be working together on it. It's not, you know, two individuals, it's a team working on the project. On IPSASB updates, we do have a plan. We're watching it. I think we need to be careful we don't overreact until they finalize the changes. So there's a real risk of that. And, you know, I think we'll monitor how close we're getting to our approval date and how this is developing, and we'll make sure that if there are changes that have happened that will be helpful that we can integrate, that we'll make them. If there are ones that aren't, we'll think about a plan, whether we finalize and go out with a minor exposure draft at that time on changes to our own standard, and we've done that in the past. So I think we've got options. It's just there are too many to guess what they might be right now. We just need to see where we are.
Okay. I'd like to just keep going with member comments at the moment. I'm mindful of time. I don't want to, you know, because a lot of this is actually going to be, we just need to see what we've got and not second guess it. Renee, and then I'll take Angela, but then I want to, you know, because we're already at 5 minutes over the time.
Just a very quick question, again, on the same theme of our capacity to review and to harness all of the insight from the response, given the size of it. So I know the limitations of in vivo. What about, and I know the staff is considering other tools, more powerful tools, AI enabled, but is there an opportunity to start incorporating a bit of that in this analysis here? I know I've had some, you know, very, you know, informal discussions with staff, and of course I know you're working on it, but are we planning to incorporate a bit of that here to start testing the water, and maybe does staff need help with that? Do we have around the table in our organizations smart, young, you know, Gen AI folks who would like to just have fun with that data?
Just come back quickly on it, because I'm happy to have offline discussions with anyone who's got bright ideas on how to use technology. As if you didn't know, the staff's becoming very AI proficient, and we're quite savvy with AI these days. I'm saying that in jest, but we are learning and we're playing around with it, and I think we will try some different things. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver those, so I'm not going to make any bold statements that AI is going to save the world for us on this. We'll see what it does, and if we get some learnings out of that can help us be more efficient, we'll share those with you and let you know, just like we did when we started using in vivo. We let the board know how we were using it and made sure they were comfortable. We'll do the same with anything we do in AI. But yeah, we're looking forward to playing around a little bit and seeing what we can find.
Okay, thanks. So Angela, final intervention, and then I want to move us on.
Thank you. It's just really a question about reviewing the responses. It's a process question. There are two things I note in responses that we get in financial reporting projects. One, some respondents just do a covering letter or a very large covering letter and don't actually answer the SMC number 1, 2, 3. Interested just in how the staff incorporate those in their tools and their analysis. And the second thing I notice sometimes in our financial reporting is there's sometimes maybe 12 questions, and they may answer the first one, and the questions may be grouped. So they might say, we disagree or agree. So I'm not going to answer 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm going to jump to 6, 7. How does staff go about the art of incorporating that with tools that are looking specifically for the answer to SMC 1, 2, 3?
This is where we rely on the good old trusted human. We don't use the tools for that. So we do read the responses and we do the tagging when we in vivo. So when I read, you know, get some responses and they'll have a 10-page cover letter before they start actually answering the question. But sometimes they give you 3 or 4 of the SMCs in that letter. So even if they don't say it's SMC1, they're talking about SMC1, we tag it. So we make a judgment call, and we've got lots of practice on that. We read these letters, we read them again, we code them, we check the coding. Like we spend a lot of time going through it in detail, so you don't have to. But yeah, it's a good point. And you know, we don't. You'll also get sometimes, and we use judgment in this. Someone will say, "Yes, I agree," and then they go on for 4 paragraphs with a but. And then by the time you're reading, it's like that doesn't really sound like an agree. That's more of a partially agree. And I remember a couple times, you know, that's the opposite of agree. That's a disagree, and we code it as that. So we don't take it at face value what they say the answer is. We analyze it and we make a call.
Yep. Okay, so I think that has been, you know, we've covered a lot of ground, but it really was the intention to kind of give the board the perspective on where we've been, where we are now, and just how we're going to approach the next stage. But I do think it's really important that what Ross has said, which is now we need to listen to what our stakeholders have told us, and then we will start to chart the way forward. And it will be a process where some things are clearer, other things are less clear, and you know, we'll just keep moving through it really as we've done up until now. I think we just need to hold on to that. You know, we have come a huge distance, and yeah, we'll make it. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of that item. I think, Ross, we're over to you now in terms of the Programme and Technical Director's report.
Yes, and it shouldn't take long. It's been a good week, but there are a couple slides, so I'm just waiting for those to come up. And can you pass me the clicker? So it looks like they're coming up. Just wanted to point out, I don't know if anybody knows, does anyone guess what that building is on this slide?
Consulate of Canada.
It's the Embassy of Canada.
Oh, Embassy.
I just wanted to show everyone my favorite building in Washington. I always love to put a picture up of where we are on the slide. And as you know, there's a current leader who keeps talking about us as part of the U.S. And I just want to make a point that we have an embassy here in Washington. I crossed the border to come here, and this is a different country from my home country. And my country's there with the flags, but it's here in Washington. You can go see it. It's down on the mall. It's a great building. Stop by and say hi to the Canadians. So as I like to do at the end, I just want to highlight the main changes, impacts on the work program. And, you know, I think we'll have some movement in the work program and timelines at the moment, but right now it's more just adding more information because of the project briefs that got approved and noting that we approved the definition of materiality this morning, which I anticipated when I did my slides. In keeping with the Canadian theme, I just wanted to say great job. And actually, I wanted to point out this is me using AI. So you might, I'm not an ageist, so I feel kind of young when I use AI. So, yeah, you might remember from previous meetings when I do this, I have the icons that come stock. I've now learned how to do this in AI, so watch out. And then we just had a great discussion on the check-in meeting. And again, I've been using AI, and I thought, what a great way to show what we're doing and building a bridge and diverse group of people working together to solve a difficult problem. And I think that's what we've got coming up, and that's what the check-in meeting will be all about is, you know, what's the floor plan, what's the map for what we're hearing in comments, where are we going to start to go? And like these people, I think they're working out a problem. They don't know the answer yet, but they're going to start to figure it out. And I think that's what we'll be doing in April. So the only thing I would say to members is please do your best to keep that time available. I think it's a critical check-in meeting. And the other point I want to make is I don't think, like previous years, we're going to be giving any more check-ins back to members. So we do operate on a principle, if we don't need it, we cancel it. I think we're going to need them. And that's it from me. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ross. Not seeing any flags raised. So I think, that does bring us to the end of the formal meeting. I think, back to your slide, actually, I think, we have had a really good meeting in terms of, not just the formal approvals, but I think we've actually shaped some of the other projects. I thought it was really helpful discussion, for example, on the presentation of financial statements. That really, I think we collectively as the board can give ourselves a pat on the back in terms of that really puts some shape into what's the next stage on that project, and a good indication of where the board is at the moment and so on. And hopefully you all feel reasonably prepared and up to speed going into that discussion, those important discussions in April. So thank you very much, everybody, for all the input over the last 4 days. Thank you to our colleagues from the World Bank for hosting us. I think, we got off to a great start at the beginning of the week with the event here, which really sort of shone the light on the adoption and implementation. And I think that was a great lens. And then I think we've made some great progress on delivering global standards. So good teamwork. I will now close the formal meeting. I'm conscious that various board members have got travel issues that they're trying to deal with as a result of the closure of Heathrow Airport, and others need to get off early. What I'm going to propose is that we actually go straight into the in-camera session with board members at this stage. I don't want to lose the time on that, but equally I recognise people have got things that are going on. So if board members are okay with that, if you can just hang on here for a few minutes whilst everybody else, this is goodbye in terms of observers and TAs. Leah, is the lunch already ready outside? Okay. And if you can try not to eat everything whilst the board members are in here. Thanks, everyone, and safe travels. And for those impacted by the delays, hope that gets sorted out.